Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us at this webinar. Our focus today is going to be how do you get projects done in the current COVID-19 environment and get them done before the end of the year. As I said earlier, my name is Eric Hasselbusch. I'm a partner at Benchmark. I've been in the roofing industry for about 16 years. Most of my time is focused on business development and roof consulting activities. My cell and email are there if you'd like to reach me at any time. Andrew Reynolds will be joining me. Andrew is also a partner at Benchmark. He's been in the industry for about 10 years. He's a senior consultant as well as a professional engineer. Troy Kaiser, part of our paving team, has been in the industry for 35 years. Troy has a tremendous amount of paving experience. He's a senior consultant on the team. Thanks for being with us today, Troy. And then finally, Ben Fiddler has been with Benchmark for 5 years. He's a staff consultant, and Ben is actually running the poll questions today, as well as he may jump in during the question and answer period as well. So before I jump into the presentation, I would like to tell you just a little bit about Benchmark so you kind of have a foundation. Benchmark is focused on roof and pavement consulting. We've been in business for around 30 years. We're an independent firm. We're not owned by any manufacturers, but we work with lots of different companies. If you look at the picture in the bottom right, all the owners are actually in that photo somewhere. We have 21 offices throughout the United States, and we're headquartered in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and Waukesha, Wisconsin. As you see by the next slide, you can see our coverage primarily focused in North America. We do some work overseas, but it is generally at a client's request. We don't look for overseas work. We primarily focus on North America. Before we move forward, let's go ahead and take a look at the 3 remaining webinars in this series. May 7th, May 14th, and May 21st. 2 of them are focused on pavement management, and pavement rehabilitation, and then 1 on roof design. With that, let's go ahead and move into today's presentation. The focus being, how do you get a project completed by the end of this year in the current environment? I've had personally 4 projects that have been put on hold, likely start to be coming back soon. We've had some projects move forward, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in the day. But when parking lots are empty, schools are closed, there's opportunities for projects to move forward. And fortunately, we've really not had too many projects canceled at this time. But we are seeing miscellaneous across the board with that question. So let's take a look at the overview of the presentation today. We're going to focus on 3 primary areas. The impact of COVID-19 on roof and pavement projects, the impacts on the design and bid process itself, and then finally we'll wrap it up with a summary of today. So 6 areas we will touch on: funding, health and safety of vendors, contractor availability or backlog, schedule, material supply and storage, and site restrictions, quarantines, and travel ban. So let's start with the funding challenges. As you look at the sign to the right, I think everybody has been somewhat uncertain with funding during this time frame. So we've had some concerns and challenges with availability of funds. Delayed projects are risk of losing funding. Projects that are ready to go when the COVID is kind of eased up will likely get first funding. The approval process is going to take some additional time. We have contacts that are normally dealing with roofing and paving issues almost every day, every week. Their roles and responsibilities have been shifted. They aren't thinking at all about roofs and pavement right now. And in many cases, we've got folks working from home. The normal processes of getting things approved in a corporate environment can change, and so it may slow that up a little bit. And then finally, in some cases, we're seeing clients, more scrutiny is being asked, or funding is being scrutinized more than ever. So we need to be prepared for that. So what are some of the solutions for some of these issues? Well, availability is really pretty simple. You've got to start the planning process as soon as possible, so you're either prepared when it eases up, or in some cases, try to start execution as soon as you can as well. The approval process may take additional time. So take a look at the standard timeline and consider adding 2 weeks, 4 weeks to that, because we know and we're seeing interruptions in that process right now at clients. So what's the new reality look like, and how can you fit your project into that new timeline? As it relates to scrutiny for projects and funding, well, make sure you have all your funding requirements in order. Make sure you have objective information to support the need for funding. And then make sure you have a sound design and bidding process in place so it reduces the risk for change orders in the future. And finally, one that people don't always think about, but we do believe there will be some opportunities for price savings during this event and after this event. So let's look at the health and safety of vendors, some of the challenges. We believe there will be some laborers that just aren't comfortable coming to work and concerned about the virus and getting it. And we also know there's going to be increased demand. We've seen it in a lot of industries already. And more importantly, understanding how to use that PPE properly. So let's look at those two things. And what does that mean? Well, increased absenteeism of labor. You want to address those things in your contract documents, both for laborers and schedule, maybe number of laborers that need to be on the project, or some schedule deadlines to make sure you can get those things addressed and stay on top of them. Number 2, provide a safe environment for contractors. And again, every company is different. Every situation is different. But here are some simple things we've seen incorporated in some places. Providing external access to the roof. Contractors don't need to go through the building. Creating opportunities to separate contractors from other contractors whenever it's possible. Creating an environment where it's clean and safe for break areas. And then finally, delivery drivers in some cases stay in their trucks, don't ever get out. I think you'll see as we talk about this the rest of the day, communication is incredibly important during this time. And we've probably had more communication with our clients about projects, about other things than we've ever had right now. And it's really been kind of interesting. And then finally, the last piece, increased demand for and or understanding of required PPE. Include those conversations during the pre-bid as well as pre-construction, because we've seen sometimes that changes on a daily basis. Again, that comes back to communication. Communicate what's needed so everybody's aware of that. As we move on to scheduling challenges, we're going to touch on both project delays as well as project acceleration. Some of the solutions for scheduling, project delays, and this is a great example of a project I am involved with right now. We are meeting every Friday for 10 to 15 minutes with the project team just to talk through, has anything changed that's going to create an issue for starting this project on the determined date? And many of these things have to do with the COVID environment. So it keeps everyone on the same page. It doesn't take much time, but we know we're going to be prepared when it's time to start this project. Get a jump start on any approvals, any design and permitting processes. Troy and Andrew will both touch on kind of approvals and permitting processes and some issues they've seen. And project acceleration. We've seen schools move forward in some cases, schools out, parking lots are open, even roof areas are easy to get access to with no students in place. And in some cases, with people working from home, there may be a lot less traffic and a lot less vehicles in parking areas. So projects could go quicker, as well as number of phases to complete those projects could be reduced, resulting in cost savings. Material supply and storage challenges. If you look at the picture on the right, you don't ever want to see materials stored like that on your job site. They're wide open, moisture, rain, all those things, wind, they could blow away. You just don't want to see that. So storage is really important. So let's look at a couple other areas here. Product availability. Are products going to be available, or are we going to have issues getting materials to the job site? Well, on the roofing side, right now, the only thing we've really seen or heard has to do with aluminum shingle nails. We've talked to lots of manufacturers. We don't see at least any short-term issues with product availability. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen at some point in time, but right now we just aren't aware of that. Storage materials, again, if your project has been delayed, how are you going to store those materials correctly? Or if you're going to pre-purchase materials for a project that will start in the future. And then finally, Troy will talk about some specific issues related to pricing of asphalt-based products later in the presentation. So product availability. What can you do about that? Number one, as I said, we don't know if it's going to be an issue right now. Number two, verify the product availability before you sign the contract. Number three, include alternatives in the bid package so if there is an issue, you can address it and you don't have to redesign anything. Number four, consider ordering and purchasing and storing materials prior to the project start. That is an option. So storing materials, keep the materials dry and watch out for expired products. Make sure you don't get products that are going to expire within the next 2 months, and you could end up with old product on your roof very easily. Potential reduction in price with asphalt-based products. I'll leave that to Troy. He'll talk about the asphalt price index in a little while. And other than that, we've not seen any impact on fabric, piping, any other issues related to paving at this time. Contractor availability and backlog challenges. We think this is going to be a significant challenge. When COVID eases up, we think there's a significant backlog out there for projects based on our conversation with contractors. We think there's going to be price increases. If there's a big backlog, prices tend to go up, and we do have some concerns about quality. The industry had a shortage of skilled labor to start with, and that's not gotten any better during this time frame. If anything, they may add more people that are unskilled going forward. And then finally, I think there's going to be a rush to make up lost revenue. Companies have just not made the revenue they're used to in the last 2.5 months, and so they will likely be pushing to make up revenue. Those two things combined do create some quality concerns. And then finally, especially if you're in the northern United States, a shrinking construction window is an issue you have to be aware of. So what can you do for contractor availability? If you can't build it right now, be ready to go and be first in line when it's time. You can look at some options for conceptual drawings and design or preliminary design documents and try to bid earlier. Both Troy and Andrew will address some areas where you can move your design process along quicker or earlier in the process. Quality reduction. Well, you really need to have some sort of quality assurance process, whether that's someone from your own facility that has the experience, knowledge, and expertise to be able to verify, is the project being installed as specified? The documents on the right-hand side are an example of a daily construction report that we use, but there are many things you can use. It documents the amount of work completed, it documents the type of work completed, and it documents any specific issues or challenges that may have come up during that day during the project. As it relates to shrinking the construction window, you really have to plan based on your geographic region. So the last of the 6 we had was site restrictions, quarantines, and travel bans. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because these are issues that are very specific to the companies that we deal with, and I imagine everyone on the phone has some very specific issues related to these 3 topics. So again, it comes back to communication. Communicate with your project team early and communicate often with that project team. And know and understand how the company policies that you have in place can impact contractors and other vendors you bring onto your work site. That just takes some time and communication. So how can you get a roof or pavement design project completed in this environment? We're going to talk about that, and communication, I've said that multiple times already, is very important. As we look at this little cartoon in the bottom right-hand corner, I want you to find a bold and innovative way to do everything exactly the same way it's been done for the last 25 years. I think we can all probably agree, as we're on a web call today, as we've probably used multiple web-based platforms for making phone calls and having meetings recently, the way we're doing business is changing. And Andrew and Troy are going to talk about some of those things. So I would encourage everybody on this call to be flexible and be open to alternative processes. And if you're willing to look at those two things, I think your projects can move forward just fine.
So what I want to talk about today is impacts on roof design when we have limited access, whether that be to the facility or just to the interior of that facility. As we progress into this COVID situation more and more, we are finding it more and more likely that we might not be able to get into the interior space. This can have some negative impacts on your design process, but there are some workarounds to those struggles that you're going to meet. One thing you're not going to be able to do is a proper deck inspection, and that can kind of impact you in a couple different ways. The biggest thing is you're not going to be able to visualize and identify and kind of log deteriorated decking. Sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it's not. Kind of in these two pictures on the right, that's deteriorated gypsum decking. Very easy to see, very easy to spot. The left side is actually after tear off of a portion of a roof. You can see all the pinholes that are sitting in there. And that actually wasn't easy to identify because the client had actually just painted the interior side of the deck. So it kind of covered up all those areas. One other thing you're not going to be able to do is gather temperatures and humidity readings from the inside of your space. This is especially important on situations where you have high humidity or maybe high temperatures that could push that moisture into your roof system. The picture in the center here is just a vapor barrier being installed on a project. And on the right side, that's a tool we use called a psychrometer that quickly takes temperatures and humidity readings for you. How this can impact your project is you're either going to probably under-design or over-design your vapor retarder situation. If you over-design it, you might put a vapor retarder in where you don't need it, and it's just wasted cost on material and labor. If you under-design it, you can get that moisture going into your roof system, and that can take years off that system's life potentially. One other possible impact is not being able to measure out structural steel spacing. This can cause some confusion when you're installing replacement decking materials. We did talk about as-built already and how important those are, and that is definitely a situation where having as-built drawings can be a solution to that situation. Additionally, along with that, the facility might need to shoulder the load for some tasks, and what that would take is training between the designing or the designer and that staff. And what you can do is kind of teach them to identify the really crucial bad areas of roof deck. You can kind of put their focus towards areas where they know they have leaks. You can also use FaceTime or similar technology to measure the interior temperatures using that psychrometer. So they could either go out and buy a psychrometer, or the designer could send them one. And because that tool is actually pretty easy to use, it's just knowing what to do with the information afterwards. If that facility is uncomfortable with completing any of that work, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You can keep going with that before construction, as long as you do it at some point. You just want to note that you might get a little bit of a higher price increase if you do that after bidding compared to getting that information before the bids are done. So if the facility is completely prohibited to enter, can't get on site, can't get on the roof, can't get inside the building, it still is possible to start a design process. And I'm going to kind of walk through some ways that you could get around some issues. One thing that always needs to be done is photo documentation of the roof, of the interior of the building, of the roof deck. And that's something, again, that the facility could do for the designer. And one additional service that you could think about using, it's getting more and more popular, is drone imagery. There are multiple, there's a ton of companies out there now that are doing photo imaging of, walls, roofs, parking lots. So that's definitely a technology that can be taken advantage of. They don't even have to get inside your site. They can set up in a parking lot, outside of a gate. They pretty much schedule a flight pattern. They fly your roof, and then you get actually some pretty good imagery out of it. So it's something to think about. One thing, if you can't get on site as a designer, you're not going to be able to get your core cuts done, which is crucial on every single project. One thing to work around on this, if you can still get a local contractor on site, they certainly can take core cuts, especially in the field. If they can cut details at perimeters and curbs and any sort of large piping, stuff like that, that's great too. They should be able to document and measure everything that's there, take photos of it, and send all that information to the designer to let them get going. If a core cut can't be done, again, as-builts are great because you can go back and see what the last roof was installed. You might be able to pull some of those details out of there, so those are always great to have. And one thing, especially if you're doing a roof recover or if that's the desired roof system, one thing that you're going to have to do is an infrared moisture scan. And sometimes this is good to do even if you're doing a roof replacement. What you're going to find are problem areas within a roof system. You're going to find moisture in your roof system. You might be able to focus on, hey, we might have some bad deck here. Or, hey, this has been a leak problem for a long time. What can we do different here in the future? If you can't get on site to do a handheld scan, which is kind of a preferred method, there are, again, drone technologies that have infrared cameras mounted to them, and they'll fly the site and be able to pick up readings. There can be some issues if you have real heavy ballast. You're really an infrared scan, whether you use drone or handheld, isn't going to be a great option. And then scanning single ply white materials can provide some difficulties. So that's kind of a situational thing. There's some testing you can do beforehand to figure out if you're going to pick up good results or not. So we have found that there's definitely some impacts on the roof bidding process. As Eric mentioned earlier, there's definitely a fluctuation on contractor availability. The biggest kind of issue in the roofing industry before this hit was the amount of labor that was available. And when I say the amount of labor, that's kind of qualified installers. There's always bad labor out there, but the availability of good contractors was always kind of an issue recently, and this is just kind of magnifying that more. There are, jobs being pushed out. There's jobs being pulled up, so that fluctuation of finding good contractors is going to vary a lot right now. Access restrictions are going to result in more variables during the bidding within your bidding documents. If you can't get on site to get details and get all these readings done, there's just going to be bigger variables. You're not going to have defined answers within those bidding documents, so you might get a higher fluctuation between your bids. And then if you can't, there are occasions, depending on deck type and roof system, where you need to do fastener adhesive pull tests and those infrared scans I talked about. If you can't do those beforehand, like I said, you're going to probably pay for them later in change orders. You can build your bidding documents to have unit pricing, so you can kind of get some of this handled before the bids come in, so you can try to handle change orders using those unit prices when they happen. But that's definitely where we need to start seeing clients and owners start building in a little higher of a contingency into their projects just to handle some of these unforeseen conditions. And with that, I'm going to throw it over to Troy, and he's going to talk about some impacts on pavement projects.
Thanks, Andrew. Today I'm going to talk about what I've seen going on with our pavement projects that are underway right now as far as impacts from this COVID virus. Unlike the roofing side of Benchmark. We have easier access to our sites because we don't go inside the buildings, and generally the lots and roadways we're looking at don't have any cars or people using them, so it's been very easy. Obviously, we've been following our safety protocols and the site's safety protocols with extra PPE. But if you have a site that you can't allow us to enter to evaluate or do data collection on your parking lots, you have some options. One option would be if you are a current client and we've done inspections or evaluations of your parking lots already, we will have enough data to do a very good set of plans and specs for a construction project. But if you're not currently a Benchmark client, then you've got some options as far as having us or whoever your engineer is do design off of Google Images, aerial photos, or using drones to get those aerial photos. One drawback I see from that is it's very hard to pick up on drainage issues from aerial photography, and that could be something where you could miss a particular item during construction. And so as part of that, I would add in additional contingencies to the bid for unforeseen items so that some of those costs are covered in the initial bid process. The other thing I've seen for some changes or challenges for the data collection for our guys is as far as traveling, we are flying, but sometimes if a site is close enough, we are opting to drive. Or if we're flying, we're trying not to fly through cities that would cause us issues when we get to our site. Because if we fly through a city and it's a hot zone, where we go to, if it asks if we've been to that hot zone, we have to say yes, even if we just went through the airport. So those are the things we're watching as far as travel for data collection. Other impacts I'm seeing as part of the design phase, we collect a lot of data, including we have a few subcontractors come in to do geotech. Taking borings is critical to a proper design. It lets us know the thickness of the existing pavement and stone, the condition of the subgrade and how much moisture there is. And sometimes when there's drainage issues, we have a company come in and do a full topo survey. So in working with subcontractors at this time, we're finding that we're having to do a lot more coordination. There's paperwork that these subs have to fill out prior to going to the site with questionnaires on where they've been, if they have any symptoms. There's the additional PPE. A really big thing for subcontractors and contractors is the one person per vehicle thing, because a four-man crew riding in a truck to a site, now they have to take 4 vehicles. So that's a difference I've seen. And I've seen some slight delays in getting the reports back due to social distancing. In one case in particular, the laboratory doing the testing of the core samples can only allow one person in there at a time, so they're not able to churn out as many results as they normally do. So I've seen a slight delay there, nothing major, but just a note I wanted to make on that. Another impact on pavement projects is the permitting process. A lot of our projects require municipal permitting or state permitting through like the DNR offices. And a lot of those offices are closed and people are working from home, so that's causing some slight delays in getting answers back. Right now for municipal meetings, we're seeing delays or even cancellations of meetings. When the meetings are being held, they're being held on Zoom or other video platforms, and that can be very interesting when 25 people try to talk at the same time. It can be a little confusing. And sometimes for the permits, there's additional data that we have to go back and collect that we didn't know we needed, and then we have to access the site again and go through all those same protocols. As far as impacts on the actual bidding and bid documents, normally what we do for larger, more complex projects is we have actual on-site pre-bid meetings for all the interested contractors. We spend about an hour going in a big meeting, going through the plans and specs, and then we all walk the parking lot or roadway and answer any questions the contractors might have. And it's very important for them to see these more complicated projects so they know they're bidding it properly. And what we've had to do is hold the pre-bid meetings via teleconference or video conference, and then set up a separate day for our consultant to go down on site and do walkthroughs with only 1 or 2 people at a time. So a process that might take 2 hours now might take one of our consultants all day to walk all the contractors through. And that's okay, because we're following the protocols, but we're getting the job done. Again, I talked about contingency and allowance items, adding some things in if we haven't been able to access the site to make sure that they're covered in the bid. We use something called the bituminous price index, and Eric mentioned that earlier. We actually have used that before this whole COVID situation. What the bituminous price index does is it protects the owner and the contractor from a very volatile petroleum market. And as you all know, right now, petroleum is way down, and it could go back up very quickly. And so what it does is it takes the item called asphalt cement, which is the glue that holds the asphalt together. It's the most expensive part of the asphalt, and it breaks that quantity out. For this particular example that I've shown here, the project requires 200 tons of asphalt cement, and at the time of the bid, it was at $75.20 per ton. And we get that price from the Department of Transportation websites because of the amount of bidding that the DOT does. They've used this for a long time. So any state, you can look up what their bituminous price index is for the month. So at the time of bid, the cost of the AC is $15,000 and some change. But when the project is awarded and the contracts are sent out, it's adjusted to whatever the bituminous price index is at that time. It could be a month later, it could be a week later, but in this particular case, it had dropped down to $64.40 a ton, and it saved the owner approximately $2,000. And so it protects the owner on, so he gets a price break if the prices go down, but it also protects the contractor if the asphalt prices go up. They don't have to be worried about losing money on a project because of a change in the petroleum market. And I think a third thing that it does is it keeps the contractors from having to guess and putting fluff in their bid to cover those costs, which if they're not needed, it just drives the price up for the owner. And the last thing, as far as bidding, I'd like to maybe give the contractors a little more time right now to analyze the bids. So typically if we give them like a week and a half to get back to us, maybe we go to 2.5 weeks for them to return their bids. That way they can collaborate with subcontractors and do a little more investigation and find out better ways to get the job done and lower the costs. Impacts on the actual construction has a lot to do with just the safety protocols. The contractors themselves have safety protocols as well as the site. What I've seen is when we first start the job, the contractors have to fill out the questionnaire to let people know whether they have symptoms or if they've traveled to some of these hot zones or out of the country. They do that once when the job first starts, as long as none of the personnel change. But if a new person comes on, they can fill that out their first day. And as far as the contractors' protocols, I've seen that they've been taking temperatures of all the employees every morning before they start work, just to make sure nobody's sick and contaminating everybody. The other issue we've noticed with construction right now is no building access by the contractors. Sometimes our clients will allow contractors to use their restrooms and sometimes even their cafeterias for lunch. And right now there's absolutely no building access by the contractors. They have to stay outside in the parking lots. So that means portable restrooms for them. And for Benchmark, we've never had to do this in the past, but we've started providing portable restrooms just for our consultants' use. So that's separating our consultants a little bit more from the crew as far as using restrooms. So in summary, look at data collection options. If you can't get somebody on site, we can figure out ways to get you plans and specs or even concept drawings or parking lot options. Have all your permits in place. Get a jump on that. We've seen slight delays there. do projects now. Take advantage of the cost savings of these lots being empty and the lower fuel costs. Phasing of a parking lot can add $5,000 to $10,000 on just for mobilization. So if you can do a lot in one phase, instead of having the contractors have to do half and then come back, it's a big savings. If you can't do your projects right now, be first in line for when everything opens up. Have your permits in place, your design done, your contractor picked, lined up, and just let them know, hey, when things open up, we're going to be ready to go, and we want to be first in line, because there will be a backlog when everything opens up. And there'll be a very short window in these northern climates to get projects done before the weather changes and we can't do a quality job. And if you can't do any projects this year and you've been delayed till next year, get the planning done now for 2021. We can get your designs, your plans and specs, bid stuff out, let the contractors know that it's for next year so they give you the good pricing, or be ready to bid it first thing in the spring by having everything ready to go, and take advantage of the situation and look for the bright spots. With that, I will turn it back to Eric.
Thank you, Troy. So in summary today, communication is key to everything we talked about today. Get your team involved early. Evaluate your options. There's more than one way to complete a project, so consider your options available to you. Be patient and flexible. I think this is the thing that we have seen more than anything from everybody we work with today. Give people some grace. And people are doing that. It's just been really exciting to see how people are working together, and have really enjoyed that. And then finally, roof and pavement projects can be successful in this environment. So with that, we very much appreciate you taking the time to join us today.